Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Fast Paced Fundamentals. I am your host, Master Crystal, or Crystal Cabret, for those who know me off planet. We are going to be talking about more things that you guys should know for your stories. We're just going to tap into what the topic of the day is. Last month, we were talking about the triad of story, which was plot, theme, and character. So if you missed that episode, you can always go back if you're watching this on Storyteller Planet. These episodes are always available on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. Try to make it inclusive for everyone so you can get the information quickly. But today, what are we talking about? We are talking about a lot of different things. I'm not going to lie. We normally try to keep these concise, 30 minutes maximum with instruction on the topic. Sorry, my brain is a little overwired with all the things that are happening on planet right now. But today we are going to be talking about the hook, the arc, and within the arc, the difference between a story arc and a character arc, and then the payoff from all of it, because this is something you need to know. What I was trying to say before, kind of got ahead of myself, was that these episodes are supposed to be 30 minutes maximum. We're supposed to be fast paced. We're not supposed to be long, drawn out, and lengthy. But this is a meatier topic, one of the meatiest I think we're going to explore this year. And I feel like every topic from here on out, we just kind of dive a little bit deeper into the nuances that some people talk about, some people don't talk about. So today we're just going to clear it all up. So if it's a little longer than 30 minutes, I do apologize, but I'm going to be concise with my examples. And we're just going to get into it because your take home assignment will probably reflect everything we're talking about today. So if we go a little too fast, you can always go back. And if anything, you can always ask questions at the MMG. But let's just jump in. Let's just jump in. Because the first thing that we're going to talk about is the hook, the sentence that brings in your audience and keeps them there all the way until the very end. It's the reason why people rewatch things. It's funny because the first sentence of a story is normally something that encapsulates the journey that someone is going to go on and hooks them right away. That's why in a song, the hook is the most popular part of a song. But I actually have a short fun fact of a story. Hunger Games. A lot of people love it. I personally adore it. Um, the first chapter of the Hunger Games took me forever. I think it took me 3 tries, 3 genuine solid tries to get through the first chapter because the hook, it couldn't get me past everything that this book was setting me up for as a reader, right? So when we talk about the hook, yes, it is something that drags people in. Sorry, guys, I'm going to get my words together today. I promise you. It is something that draws people in, but sometimes the thing that draws people in can be a little overwhelming, can be so large and such of a boom shocker that it might take a couple tries for your audience to actually embrace it, if that makes sense. So, yeah, that's what I thought. Sorry. Making sure that I'm not getting ahead of myself. So when we think about things to draw us in, there's a lot of cliche ways that we can go about a hook because normally you want to drive your story with action. You don't want things to just be lagging and flying in the breeze until you actually get, like, I don't know, quarter of the way through the story and you'd say, hey, yeah, this is the reason why we're here. Absolutely not. There are a lot of older movies, shows, content in general where the opening sequences have a lot of breathing room. And if you are fortunate to be any of the creatives out there in college being forced to watch movies or shows or read books that are not necessarily your flavor and are over half a century old, you're going to notice that the pacing also of this opening hook sequence is not the fastest thing in the world. And the pacing that we have now, and I will go into it a little bit more when we talk about the arcs and the different arcs that play into this. But just to last little tidbit on the hook is that we don't want to overwhelm our viewers, our readers, with too much at the beginning because we live in a very fast-paced world with very short attention spans. So we want to try to, cram everything that we think is interesting at the beginning. That again may be a boom shocker to whoever's entering your world. I know that there are some of my books that if you were to just kind of leap into it without any prior knowledge of some of the other books, maybe a little bit jarring, maybe a little bit like, whoa, I kind of just stepped into an entire different thing and that hook might be a bit much. So let's talk about the arc and how we can take some of our favorite parts, some of the juicier bits that are going to excite our audience, and kind of spread them out and give them some breathing room. Because while the hook, everyone's always like, yeah, that first line, you got to make sure that they stay until the end. Absolutely, yes, but you need to make sure that the journey that you're about to take these people on, it's not like everything is shown in the trailer. You feel me? Like nowadays, you watch a trailer for a movie and you kind of know what the story is going to be at the entire thing. Um, and what we want is to breadcrumb the best parts throughout the story so they can stay throughout the whole story. So, what is the arc? There are two types of arcs. There's a story arc and a character arc. We need both of them, but right now I'm going to focus on the story arc because we're talking about keeping our audience. And that's the whole point of today. There's a whole nother time that we're going to be talking more about our audience specifically, but this is a back end way, I'm going to say, of approaching how our audience views our story, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So with the story arc, it's an overall journey. A lot of people are familiar with the hero's journey where a person goes from being a lonely Joe Schmo and then something happens and then they go on this journey and they have very specific beats of this journey. And then once the journey's over, you either are preluding to a sequel or it's wrapped up with a happy little bow and it says happily ever after. The arc that you can find in stories, you can have different kind of arcs, okay? But the most important events, I don't know why that's there. Sorry, that was bothering me. Um, the most important events of your story, they have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And this short list that I give you here is basically your rest points. I'm going to say when you're doing a road trip, and I know people use this analogy a lot. When you're doing a road trip, you need to have pit stops planned along your road trip. Otherwise, people are going to be peeing on the side of the road, and that is not cute. You need to make sure that you're prepared for your journey. And it doesn't necessarily matter what story you are telling. You need to make sure that you're hitting all the marks that make up a story. There are a lot of people, including myself, that understand the different beats of a story and they can tell you about it in a myriad of ways because everyone is different. But the beats that I feel you need in any story to make sure that you have cohesion, but also that you hit all the points. You feel me? That it's not like I said, once upon a time there was a wolf, the end. Like you didn't get a story. You want to make sure you get all the beats and understand why we were talking about the wolf in the first place. So, exposition is the part I believe that is comes before the inciting incident, the part that tells you very briefly who this person was, what were they doing, who were they before they became great or not great, because some people were great before the story started, right? And then they ended up not being great. So in this exposition, a lot of people fall into the classic, yes, we're going to give you all of the before of this character. Like they'll start off with like when they were born, and then they work their way through creatively their life until we get to the moment where they had the inciting incident. You do not have to go that deep with the exposition. Exposition is meant to give you an introduction to the setting, the character, and possibly the prelude of what is at risk, if that makes sense. So the inciting incident, something happens. And unfortunately, something normally is sacrificed in the inciting incident, mostly the piece of whatever the heck was normal for this character. A rising action. Things are happening in the story. Hopefully, it is moving the story along. That's why it's called the rising action and not just action. If you're writing something that is a strict action, adventure, cars exploding kind of story, I would hope that the action is rising whatever the exploding is leading up to. So the rising action normally is those kind of moments, not to be like cliche, but you know, to for you guys to get a grasp. Um, when you meet new characters that are going to help you on your journey, the best friend that was initially some random person running away from thieves, the love interest that was initially this princess of somewhere or some other, I don't know, but like, you feel me? After we meet the person, something happens, and then they have to go on a journey. So all the moments of the journey are taking place in this rising action area. Then you have the lowest point. Now, this can either be the highest point or the lowest point, depending on what kind of story you're telling. The lowest point is normally like, um, if it was a sports story, for example, you have the team go out and they're battling against their rival, and they think that they're going to win, and at the very last second someone misses and doesn't make the goal or catch the ball, and everyone is so downtrodden 90% of the time in a Disney Channel movie. If you're watching uh someone fall out, it is like one of those things that they lost the competition, right? They can't move forward in whatever the goal was. This is like, painstaking, hard on a platter moment. And then something happens that, for whatever magical reason, they can continue forward on their journey, or they have to continue forward on their journey. Because sometimes the lowest point is that someone dies. You know, not to be like that other type of cliche, but you know, um, I personally enjoyed in Frozen 2. I don't know why this is coming to me. Maybe it's just because I saw the video recently of them translating the song into American Sign Language, which is fantastic. Random side note, but fantastic. In Frozen 2, there is a lowest point where Anna literally loses everything. She loses her sister, she loses her best friend, Olaf. She's disconnected from Kristoff. She has to figure out how to get back to where she left everyone and then figure out a plan of how to save her people. And she has a whole song about it being the lowest point. She's literally like, I have never been this sad. I have never been this downtrodden, and I have to still move forward. I have to still figure this out. That is where your character 90% of the time lives. But if it's the highest point, because I did mention if it's the highest point, this is normally the time where, if you're writing like a tragedy, this is where they win, you know? Which is always, that's always the worst part. When you know halfway through that they won, it's like, why did they win? The jaded parts of us are like, why did they win? Because you know that after the climax, which is always the big battle of whatever the story is, whatever you were writing towards, even if it's a short story, you don't have to have like dragons and fireworks and explosions and blood splatters for it to be a successful climax. Climax is just literally, what were we fighting for? What was the story about? What was the point? This is the reason, the whole reason we were here, the reason why we stayed. Um, that's what the climax is about. If you're writing a tragedy, this climax is most likely going to end with the person losing. Just throwing it out there because it's not a happy story. If it's a happy story, then you're most likely going to have the person win, hopefully. Or if it's a mixed bag because it's like, let's say, the end of a season one finale of a show or a book, then you would have a mixed bag. Maybe they win, but they still have the bigger goal is still not won, or they realize that there is a bigger goal that has to be won in order to actually get a resolution. So the following action, or is all the events that happen after the climax, and they could be connected to the journey. So like, for example, let's say there was, again, being cliche, this big battle in a cave against a big boss, and the clan fought and won, but they're in this cave that was connected to the big bad, and now the big bad's gone, the cave is collapsing. You're not just going to cut the story off there and be like, yeah, they won the end. No, no, no. They got to get out the cave. They got to get to safety. Got to make sure they finish the journey they started. So following action, to me at least, because it could have a lot of different things, but it's basically all the events that happen afterwards, after the big climactic, dramatic, whatever was happening event. And the resolution, it could be a sentence, it could be a chapter, it could be a whole scene, it could be a whole arc. So for some people, if you really love filler, it's what happened after you got home. And home is subjective because, again, if you're like out on a journey doing the journey thing, then it may be a little, I don't know how to word it, but like, if you have your journey continuing, you're going to allude that the journey continues. If the journey ends like this is the end, then you make the resolution feel like a button. At the end of the day, the resolution makes you feel like, I went on a journey. That journey is over. The chapter is properly closed. All the questions are answered. All the holes have been filled. The end. So that is basically every story. It doesn't really matter what story you're telling, but those are the points that you kind of need. Because if you don't have a climax in your story, then people are going to feel like they went on a journey for no reason. When you are being led by a tour guide, it is the tour guide's job to make sure that you're not just getting fun facts along the way. You're actually being led through the story of whatever tour that they're taking you on. So there's going to get a point in the story of their, script that it's going to be the most exciting thing on the tour. And that is going to be your climax. So when you're thinking about how you want to draw people in through the hook, right? I want you to think about where you're taking your people and how you can spread it out throughout all of these points. But I did say that there are two arcs. That was the story arc. The character arc, and you can take a screenshot of this because I'm not going to go through each and every one of these because this is a lot. But a character arc is made up of the most important events of your story, but it's told through your character's point of view. So everything that we literally just talked about is going to be a lot deeper to your character than it is to your reader. Excuse me. To your reader, this is a person on a journey, even if you're going through first person point of view, right? Even if everything is written in I went through this, I'm going through this. your character is going to feel it as it is happening in real time. This is actually really important if you're writing a memoir. It's even more important if you are writing something that is going to be translated into a visual piece, because it makes you more connected to the story and the details that are necessary. So when you start with the exposition and you're introducing your character, there are, again, a lot of ways that you can approach that. But what is the best way that is going to represent your character and introduce them in a way that explains them without having to take them to the moment they were born? All right. I'm going to give you an example of a character arc that mimics the story arc. And yes, it's going to be spoilers, and no, I don't have any panels on it. But the example that I'm going to be giving is El Dorado, and you're going to notice a few of these examples of what a character arc entails as I hopefully give this example. But before I do, I'm going to have a water break because I'm a little parched. So please hold. Okay, story time. So, the example that I'm going to be giving today is El Dorado. I absolutely adore El Dorado's script, even though I have never actually gotten my physical hands on it, but I watched the movie enough to see the string, if you will, and the character arc between Julio and Miguel. Tulio, not Julio. I was like, I said his name and I was like, that is wrong. Tulio and Miguel um are they let me gather my thoughts so they can be concise. I told you I'm gonna get my words together, guys. To be concise on this example, Tulio and Miguel are not the wealthiest guys. They are known for being con artists, and all they want in their life is to be rich. They want gold. That is it. Their personal arcs grow as the story progresses because, in a nutshell, for those that do not know the story El Dorado, Tulio and Miguel accidentally end up on the boat of Cortez, who is looking for the lost city of El Dorado. They end up with a map that leads them to this island that has all this gold, but it's a myth. So they don't necessarily know if it's real. They put themselves in peril. They end up with a horse because, you have to have a horse. They end up on the island that's on the map. They find the place. They end up pretending to be gods. And mind you, these people that are in El Dorado, they genuinely believe that they are the gods. So everything that they do, these people, like if they say, "Oh, I'm gonna smite you," they're genuinely afraid. Like there's only a handful of people that that do not buy into their ruse. So, well, without getting into the weeds, when you're looking at each person's individual character arc between Tulio and Miguel, um, if I'm quoting it correctly, Tulio is by the books and Miguel is more loosey goosey. I hope I'm not mixing them up in my head as I give this example, but I'm gonna roll with it. Um, Tulio has this inability to go with the flow and be on the fly. That's Miguel's job. Miguel is the one that gets them into trouble, that 90% of the time is asking Tulio for the plan. And as they are pretending to be gods, this camaraderie that they have formed as being con artists splits. And it taps into their inner flaws, their inner strengths, their inner weaknesses, because there is a truth to these people that Tulio recognizes immediately when they get there. He's like, all right, well, we're gods. They're going to give us tribute, i.e., gold. That is our goal. We don't want them to figure out that we're not gods and then kill us. So we're going to ask for a boat and then leave immediately to anywhere else. That is the plan of the story. That's what kind of binds the whole story together. Um, but as they're waiting for this boat to be made in about like 3 days or something crazy, um, they are struggling internally separately. Tulio and Miguel are grappling with what they want to do. Miguel wants to actually stay and continue to be a god, not necessarily because he wants praise, glory, or whatever, but because he has found a genuine love for these people that he has stumbled upon, and he wants to live with them. Like, there was nothing that these two guys had when they left. They were literal con artists that were living from day to day with their schemes and hoping that they weren't going to get caught by, the higher authorities. Meanwhile, Tulio is like, I came here for gold. I got the gold. I actually found a girl that I want to take with me. And I don't necessarily not like these people. There's nothing wrong with these people, but I don't want to stay here. I want to see the world. I have ambitions, blah, 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 blah. So these internal arcs, they follow the story. They are running on the same path, but they're completely different. They showcase who they are as individuals. And it is highlighted the moment that they step on screen who they are. When they step on screen, they're in the middle of a gambling of sorts, I think with dice and something. And basically, when these characters are introduced through their dialogue, through their expressions, um, through their mannerisms, they already showcase that Tulio is the guy who is the planner with the straightforward focus, and Miguel is the guy that's on the fly that's like, well, this plan is not working. We got to go. By the time that we get to the climax of the story, which is, remember, they got to this island initially because they accidentally ended up on Cortez's boat. Cortez finds the same island, finds the same location, and there is someone that recognizes this, and they believe he is the true god. Now, Cortez is not a nice guy. I'm not talking historically. I'm talking about in this story. Take what you will historically, do that on your own time. But in the climax of the story, which is El Dorado is about to be found by the worst possible guy on the planet, Tulio has to make a choice. He's going to leave El Dorado. He's going to leave his best friend behind, but he has to also close up the entrance to El Dorado so it can't be found by Cortez. In this, Miguel realizes obviously he wants to be with his best friend and he has to leave comfort behind and whatever, whatnot. But the whole goal, they wanted gold, is sacrificed in them saving these people who treated them like gods, who some of them, even their chief, knew that he was not a god. They protected and sacrificed the biggest goal that they had, the biggest thing tethering them as individuals in their character of their core. They wanted to be rich. They wanted to be wealthy. They sacrifice it for the people that cared for them in a way that no one else on the planet ever did. And you don't get a connection between the story and the character unless you do the work. So these bullet points that I have here, I encourage you to explore them through your own characters and see how you can apply them, because when you introduce them, it is going to showcase who they are off the cuff. They always have that saying, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. It's very impressive when a character is introduced, even if that character is not put on the screen at first. If you've ever watched the show, the movie Encanto, we don't talk about Bruno. Bruno is very, very, very depicted and never shown on screen until about either halfway or three-quarters of the way through the movie. But you already know who he is. You already have a perception on this guy. You already know we do not talk about Bruno by the end of the song. So as you're building your story, think about your main character and also some of your side characters for those that tuned into when we were talking about the characters and the squad that most people form in large group stories. Uh think about those characters, the characters that are driving the story forward, the characters that are really impactful to the beats and moments that happen in your story. Think about their inner world and think about what they're going through as these beats are occurring. And that in itself will bring more life and connection to your characters, not only to the reader and the character, but the characters to each other. Because if you know as a writer that, or a storyteller rather, that your main character is currently suffering from a panic attack, and the only person that knows about it in the room is their best friend, and their best friend somehow has to get through this weave of people without like triggering alarms to get to that character that's having a panic attack, there's going to be a very genuine way that you approach how that happens rather than it just being like, oh, this character's having a panic attack and the best friend has to figure it out. And like the whole room knows and all like making it a bigger deal than it needs to be. You feel me? So I'm not going to continue to harp on what a character arc is. I think you got a great understanding about it, but just understand that these moments that a character has are just as real as the moments that you have in your day-to-day life. So, yeah. The payoff. The reason everyone stayed with the story in the first place. The reason that we set out to acquire whatever we were acquiring when we left home has now been brought to life. If you do not do this right, I'm going to tell you right now, your audience will be very, very, very upset. This is obviously the thing that we have been talking about the entire time. What is your character setting out to achieve? What are they going to finish at the climax and wrap up by the time the story is done? Why are we following this? What is so important? If you give your audience something and never actually fulfill that promise that you gave at the beginning, they're going to be very, 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 very pissed. I will say, and again, spoiler alert, I may or may not have said this in a previous video, but it's will always stay true. It's never going to change. For those that know Divergent and have read the trilogy of Divergent, that was a series that I read as it was being released. I didn't binge it as we can do today. So imagine you got book one, right? And then you wait like a year or two for book two to come out. And then you wait another couple years for the book three to come out. And in book three, about 80% of the way through the book, the main character dies. Huh? Huh? What? Huh? Why did I go through this if the character's going to die and not for a real reason? That's the other thing. If you're going to go as drastic as say, all right, my character's goal was to be free. And the only way to have true freedom is for her to sacrifice herself so everyone else can be free. And then she has a moment that she knows for a fact that her sacrifice provided freedom. Then fine. Sure. Okay. But if there is a way to avoid that, and that's the route you take, your audience will not forgive you. Now, I'm not saying that the writer of Divergent is not a fantastic writer, that they didn't take risks, that they should be shunned or all that. No, no, no. They wrote their story, they made their choices. But when you are writing your story, whatever promise you make at the beginning of your story, you better still be fulfilling the said promise by the time you get to the end of it. Um, I will say, as someone who has failed at this in the past, it is not fun to notice that you have lost your string. This is why I personally like writing out the story arc in beats. It's not necessarily an outline, but it's just a blueprint of this is where we're going. Because if you don't have that, if you're just kind of wandering around in the breeze, then you may get lost. You may find out that you put a note in someone's boot in chapter 30 and now it's chapter 63 and we never mentioned why we put that note in the boot, why it was important, what the note said. None of it. It never comes back up. Those are the things you do not want. So when you set out to write your story, always keep in mind, why are we staying to the end? So why is this important? The outer world colors our inner world. Our inner world affects how we react to the outer world, and it's all connected in real life and in fiction. Now, that sounds very hokey, and I feel like that was from last month. But I'm gonna roll with it because I'm gonna tell you, uh, the previous month on Planet was a boom shaker. So my memory is kind of spotty, but this statement is very true. Everything that we experience in life shapes our perception, right? And not to get too philosophical with it, but when we are writing our characters, they are living the life that we are creating for them. So it is important to take it into consideration and really think about the beats that are happening before, during, and after the story that we are taking them on. And when we connect with that, our audience will give whatever they have to be a part of it. If you are a part of the Avatar The Last Airbender fan service, you will give everything to see all the things that you never got from the series. Uh, so you want your audience to have that same reaction to the story that you take them on. If you focus your story arc, if you focus on your story arc and you give your audience a satisfying conclusion to the journey that you hooked them on, you will be one step closer to writing a story that will be remembered long after the end. It's basically reiterating what I have already said. You need to make sure that the payoff is established at the beginning and is good enough for them to sit through your entire story and then feel satisfied when the story's over because it's like, they gave me what I came for. And also, that is true when talking about the type of genre and audience you are writing to as well. That is a completely different topic that we will talk about. But just to keep it in mind, just as a little extra nugget to keep in the back of your brain. Uh when you are writing specifically to a genre, to a trope, to an audience, do some research and make sure that if there are specific things, like I know in romance, there is a book called Romancing the Beat by, I believe it's by Gwen Hayes. Don't quote me on that. Because again, the memory, she at overcapacity and she also not working. So um that is a book that gives you one person's perspective about the plot, beat by beat, moment by moment, what you should have in a romance story. And a lot of genres have that. So think about that when you're talking about the expectations that your audience might have from your story. So hopefully this was in a concise and impactful video. I feel like my words were not here today, but just in case they were not uh 100% satisfactory guaranteed, um we're gonna go to Fundamentals 101. And here you can read at your leisure all the things that we talk about in more depth. See, that was what we talked about last time. This is what we're talking about today, the hook, the arc, and the payoff. And then the story arc versus the character arc is expanded on here. These is normally topics told by different masters. As you can see, the topic we are talking about today is normally told by Master Blythe and Master Process, but I have taken it upon myself to try to give all of the fundamentals, or at least the core fundamentals, a little bit more of a faster pace, or at least, more concise way of talking about it. So if these videos are not doing it for you and you are a member of the support squad, then definitely go on Planet and sink your teeth into the more textbook traditional way of understanding some of these topics. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, thought processes that need support, please go to the Mythical Manuscript Guild. It says here that if you're a support squad member, you get it for $5 a month. However, if you are also a Fantasy Island fiction reader, you also get access to the guild because, some people are not necessarily trying to be full-blown masters, but we are all storytellers. So we all may have a question or something that we're working on that's more of a hobby instead of a career that we would like, feedback or questions or whatever. Please come with open arms and open hearts, because that's what we have to offer for all of the creatives that want to come to the Mythical Manuscript Guild. So your assignment from everything that I said today, I told you, is just going to be basically what we talked about. I need you to go into the story that you are trying to tell. I need you to identify the hook. I need you to identify both the story arc and the character arc of your story. Specifically the character arc for your main characters. If you are just telling from one point of view, then just ride with that character. If it's multi-point of view, rock with as many characters as you can handle. Don't get too hardcore in the weeds. Stick as hard to the not hard. Stick as close to the bullet points as possible. Without it becoming too hard for you to process and then just wanting to put the whole thing away. And also the payoff of your story. Why are we staying to the end? It is the most important thing that you need to understand because, again, attention spans are very, very small. And we need to make sure that we are maximizing every second. So, next month, we are going to be talking about the essentials of world building. I'm going to tell you right now, it is not going to be super in depth. We have talked about world building in the past, and it can take a lot longer than half an hour. So we're going to be concise. And again, Fundamentals 101 on Planet has a more in-depth and breathable way for you to absorb this information. So again, if this is too fast-paced for you, just head on Planet. But that is all I have for you guys today. I hope that you have a fantastic month. May is a fantastic time to reconnect with yourself as a storyteller because there's a few things going on around the planet, but not too much other than the swap of the seasons, depending on which part of Earth you're on. I hope that you are having a fantastic month of May or whatever month you are watching this in, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.